Hi, I'm Steve Turney.
And I'm Sarah Way.
And today we have a guest coming up, Lynn Donahue. And we really get into some deep conversation. And I just really admire how she gets into it because she's had her own journey. She shares a lot about the transformation that she's gone through, and a lot of it has to do with education. And I sat there applauding her in my mind for doing that work, but it does take figuring out how to find it. And at Mental Health America, where you're a part of, you all have tremendous resources for this kind of process.
Yeah. I also commend her deeply for sharing her story, because it is hard to dig out and tell your mental health story. But yes, one thing we do with MHA is we do mental health screenings online, which is so helpful because you go on and you take this really brief test, but it asks you some really important questions that you might not think to ask yourself. And yeah, it's just, they're hard topics to talk about, but it is really inspiring because you also inspire other people to tell their story. And it just becomes this beautiful community of people getting the help that they need.
Yeah, and bringing it to light. I mean, she talks about some tough things. We do talk about, some eating disorder type things. We mentioned suicide in this conversation, and being able to talk about these topics is powerful. But we also want you to know what's coming up in this conversation.
Yeah, always a good disclaimer.
Perfect. And with that, let's get into it. Hey, welcome to The Boost, conversations with people promoting mental health. And I'm here with my co-host, Sarah Way. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Yes, it's good that you're here. I'm happy about that. And I'm so happy that Lynn Donahue is here too as our guest. Welcome. How are you?
Yes, welcome.
I'm good. Thanks for having me. This is a great opportunity and I appreciate being invited.
Nice. Well, we're grateful you're here, and we're grateful for this little gift. Not a little gift, but it's such a great gift. Who Do You Think You Are, which is your new book that you just launched. When did you launch this?
My book came out in March, early March, and it's my first book. And if you read my book, then you know me, so we don't need to meet. No, I'm kidding.
It says it all.
No, well, we haven't read your book, so we need to hear all about you.
Yes, I'm excited.
Before we get into the book, and all of that, which I can't wait to, tell us your virtual hug, which is the thing we do at the outset here. Tell us somebody or something you're grateful for today.
Well, what comes to mind first, especially in this season of my life where I have launched this book, and is my husband, Don. He has been my number one cheerleader, huge fan of what I'm doing. He's helped promote, and he's just really, I don't want to say put the wind beneath my wings, but kind of. And so I'm especially thankful for my husband and for his ability to help me shine.
He's been a little bit of wind beneath my wings.
Has he?
Yeah, I mean, he's an event pro.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him on the phone yesterday. I was hoping you would sing a little bit of that song.
No.
That's what I was waiting for.
Only
just
lullabies to sleep.
Couple bars from Laura.
We'll put it in the background.
No, he's awesome. Yeah, he's great. Don's great. Don's been on our podcast, and let's just shift right into it because I want to get to this. Is your shameless plug? Tell us about this book.
So this book took me about 3 years to write. And when I first started out writing, I really didn't know what I wanted to write about. I thought it might be a book of poetry. But the title came to me ironically first. Who Do You Think You Are? And
as part of your process, like internal judgment?
No, it came to me as a title.
Amazing.
It just was there. And I thought, what a great way to explore a memoir, to write a memoir in that fashion. And so, so I launched the book, and the whole process has been really exciting. I've stepped into a new role, stepped into a new me. I'm kind of getting to know who I am, Lynn, the writer. And so I'm enjoying that. But yeah, it's a reflection, and you can ask that question any way you want. You can say, well, who do you think you are? Or who do you think you are? So you could give it the inflections, and it takes on a different meaning. The answer does.
That is so sweet, because the question in my head was going to be, how do you say your title? Because you can say it so many different ways, and it has so many different meanings.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So I
super
say,
creative.
who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Yeah. With a little love in my voice.
It's
So
what we
sweet.
do with our words. They can hurt and they can be beautiful. Okay, I have a lot of other questions
Okay.
about this. So 3 years ago, you say, I'm gonna start writing a book.
Yep.
What made you do it?
Well, what made me do it is I realized that I was a writer, and I gave myself credit for being a writer. Finally, when someone told me, if you write, you're a writer. And I was in my late 40s, early 50s. It's like, I am a writer. I can call myself a writer. This is authentic. My mother wrote a few books, and she's my mentor. I wanted really to be like her and write a book. And so poetry is what I've written all of my life. And I thought, well, that would be a good place to start. I started several different poetry books, but it just really wasn't coming together like I wanted. And so I listened to a podcast one day, and the guest was Jane Fonda, and she was talking about her life. Obviously, she has quite an archive available to her, physically and visually, that I don't have. But when she wrote her memoir, she said she looked back and took an inventory on her life, like a research project.
Mm-hmm.
And these are my words, but the idea is hers. And I thought, well, what a great way to write a memoir is to go back and see how you were shaped, at what stages. Where did I become a pleaser? Where did I see that enter my life? And where did mental health, and understanding the importance of mental health come in? I mean, mental health came in way before I even knew really what it was. It was just crazy. I mean, that's what I was told. My grandmother was crazy, quote crazy.
Yeah.
But
If you talked about it at all.
yeah, if you talked about it at all, right. And it was just kind of excused away. But so it really, writing this book just opened a lot of doors and gave me a lot of pause. I had to stop writing a few times to deal with some things.
Yeah. So this is so fascinating. Like, I'm just starting this exercise. We talked about it in the last podcast. Like, this is such a recent thing, but I'm starting to go back and unpack some of my youth. And I watched some of the videos from your book launch party, and you talked about your childhood, fairly well appointed, cared for, and you have this kind of princess concept, and then this kind of pleasing childhood girl identity or something. You would describe it better, but to talk about that sort of transition early on in your life.
When I felt like I became a pleaser, so to speak, so there was a poignant moment in my life. I was probably in middle school. I was in a school play, and it was about the Disney princesses. And I got to be one of the Disney princesses who also had a solo. And I was so excited about doing that. I'd never really sung in front of people, and I didn't usually get picked. So we went on with practice. I'm working on my role. Well, a new girl comes to school, and I go to a small school, private school with, just a handful of kids.
Yeah.
Well, I was asked if I would give my princess role to the new girl to help her fit in so that she would feel more comfortable and accepted right away.
Yeah.
And that is where I realized I did things to please other people.
You gave it up?
I gave it up.
Yep.
Tell us what age you were.
I was in middle school. I can't remember the
middle
age, but middle school for sure. And I was then a dandelion. So I went from princess to dandelion.
That was your character.
Yeah.
Okay.
I said, roar.
That's not like I
That's
was
a
a
teacher.
snowflake or something. It's like, no, I was a flower.
I was a literal dandelion. My line was then roar.
Yeah.
And no solo. And I was praised. I was loved for doing that. You're so sweet, you're so kind, you're so selfless. And I was so unaware, so self-unaware. And but to be able to look back and see that moment in time sort of gives me an understanding of how it continued to play a part in my life, the pleasing mentality, the, do the right thing girl. And people would come to me for that because Laura Lynn will do the right thing.
Okay, so that became part of your reputation and identity.
Yeah.
And for being praised, like being a child and being praised for it. Of course, you're going to keep reiterating that.
Yes. You get that feedback, that positive feedback, well, then you just keep doing it. And you perform and do well. Not that it's necessarily bad at the core of what, pleasing is, but when it becomes abusive, when someone is using it, even if they don't know it, that's when it becomes really
there's
hard.
a line between being kind to people, like you only can give so much, so you can be kind, and if you truly in that one moment wanted to give a new student something, but like if it's constant in your life and you're always putting yourself down to put others up, that's detrimental.
Yeah, it really is, and it creates a mentality of stuffing, throwing things under the rug, emotions, feelings. I'm supposed to do this and smile while I'm doing it. So the disappointment that I feel and the tears, no one sees those, just me. Yeah.
She's preaching to the choir. I can relate.
This is such a common theme with so many people that we talk
Truly
to.
is people pleasing.
People pleasing and shoving it under the rug, trying to put on a false front or a polished front at all times, this PR department that we put out in front of us with everybody we talk to. And it's hell.
Yeah.
Like it's the opposite of what we were talking about last week or the last episode, which was freedom as this ability to be disliked, is this Adlerian concept that I'm sitting with quite a bit lately. And it's like, because otherwise you have to serve a unique story to every single person that you're dealing with, and in a way that pleases them.
Yes.
And then you're disintegrated across your whole self.
It's exhausting, and you really lose your sense of self.
When did you come to like awareness that was what you were doing and why you were doing it, and how did you kind of come through to this, this work?
So I, of course, it's been a long process, and hindsight, it's much easier to see how all of these pieces fit together. But I was in a toxic relationship in college with a boy whose mother wanted me to fix him. And so I was good at fixing, good at pleasing, good at performing, and she wanted him to do better in school.
Was she like, was this a conscious direct request, or was this just like reading the room? And
oh, wow.
It was more of I'm so glad you're dating my son. Now his grades will be better. Now he'll go to class.
That's pretty twisted.
So I was being used as a tool, but
you were used as a proxy for her inability to fix her son.
Instead of being like, wow, thank goodness he's dating you because you're such a beautiful person.
And his schooling is not your work, or what she was projecting was, this is my work to make sure my son gets these grades.
Right. But to me, that seemed attainable.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was like, well, yes, I will save him.
Yeah.
And he will graduate from college because of me. I was giving myself a lot of credit.
Yeah.
But we, in an effort to try to help him, we broke up, and his mother again said, tell him he needs to go to counseling. And so I barged into his apartment and told him we had a shouting match, and I said, you just need to go to counseling.
Okay.
And he said, you need to go to counseling. And I really just had an epiphany. It's like, fine. I walked out, closed the door. I was at a Christian college, and I walked across campus into the counseling office. I mean, I went straight there.
You were like, oh.
Wow.
And I think if I had not gone straight there, maybe I never would have gone. But, you know, I was a people pleaser.
Well, thank goodness for on-site counseling for
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But so the counselor was, his name was Major, and he was over 6 feet tall,
Okay.
and he was black.
Okay.
And here I was, this little tiny white girl, looking up at him and thinking, I'm going to tell him my problems. How is this going to work? So it was a really interesting introduction to behavioral therapy. But what Major introduced me to was Melody Beattie and her book, Codependent No More, which is kind of has been at the forefront of codependency since the 90s. So then I learned what codependency was. And Major gave me just a good, foundation. Now, I didn't tell him everything because I didn't want to get in trouble. So I was doing a lot of things that I shouldn't be doing as far as the school rules go.
Sure.
So I could only go so far with being honest with him, or at least that's what I thought.
Yeah, that was your
Yeah.
limit at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But that just set me on a trajectory of coming to understand codependence and what that looks like, where it's necessary.
How would you define codependence for someone if you were telling them about it? This is codependence.
Wanting to fix someone.
Someone.
Yeah, fix someone, or taking care of every need so that person is happy. And if that person is happy, then I'm happy. So my happiness rather, is dependent on your happiness. So if I can, quote, make you happy, then the result will be I will be happy. Now, where I found out that codependency was important was when I had kids.
Okay.
So that's necessary and appropriate for my children to be codependent, for me to be codependent for them.
Okay.
And the codependency lingo has gotten a little more convoluted and with some variations since I learned about it. But this is where that's where I come from.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great note.
I like that you put it in a light as well, of like with your children, codependency is good, because you feel like people talk about codependency in a negative way all the time. And it is in that sense that you're talking about with that ex, but it is so sweet with your children too. Like that's a good version of codependency.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you don't want to be doing it, but you know, when they're young, when they're first born, they're growing. You know, your role as caregiver.
Would you say you're a wildly empathetic person?
You know, I don't know if I'm an empath. I've thought about that a lot of times, and I can feel it deeply, but I won't take on a whole room of emotion. I might pick one that I would dwell on, but not to the point where it would disable me taking on someone else's.
I always wonder that with like the codependency and people who are empathetic and you kind of feeding off other people. Is it because you're just aware of other people, or is it because you truly like desire to like make them feel good to feel good? Empathy is a blessing and a curse.
And how much of that is natural versus learned? Like I'm keying in on everybody because I'm trying to spot if there's any issue in the room that is a threat. You know, like a lot of this comes down to our incentives. You know, I see this in the workplace all the time. This inability to speak into a hard conversation because this is also the place where my paycheck comes from. And your emotional, relational paycheck came from you turning into a dandelion from a princess, you know, because you're like, well, I want to be good. I want to, you know, be welcoming and do always the right thing. I speak about, I have a daughter, she's 9. And I speak about dependence is how I call it, but codependence, that's an interesting nuance, because it's like consequence. It has such a negative term, but it's like, no, it's simply the effect of the cause.
Yeah.
It can be kind of like your book. Like, it can be, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Or who do you think you are?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk more about Laura Lynn's book right after this. At Term Productions, we craft experiences that connect, engage, and inspire. From dynamic conferences to powerful storytelling, we bring ideas to life through planning, production, and promotion, so your audience doesn't just listen, they remember. Ready to make an impact? Let's build something unforgettable together. Visit turn.productions to get started. All right, we're back with more from Laura Lynn Donahue. And Laura, we want to talk more about your book, Who Do You Think You Are? And we want to talk a little bit about the visual cover. You don't judge a book by its cover, but it does say something. Talk about what this one is saying.
Yes. So that is a photograph of me when I was 4, and my parents had taken me to Cheekwood, which is a park in Nashville, and on the park property is Cheekwood Mansion. And so we went into the building. At the time, it was much less Cheekwood than it is now. But I'm sitting in a windowsill and looking out at the gardens, and that image just kept coming back to me. The actual portrait or the photo of that hangs in my house. And when I was writing the book and getting close to the end, the image just kept coming to me when my publisher was asking me what kind of cover did I want. And so I asked her to mock up something with that particular photo in it, because it's a very reflective photo. It looks like I might be pondering that question if I weren't so young. But interestingly, I did a photo shoot a year ago, and one of the photos that came out was of me with a profile look. So that's why
Is that the one on the back?
That's the one on the back.
Is this a Jeremy Cowart
It's
photo?
Jeremy Cowart, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also reflective.
Yes,
Moment
and I
in
just
time.
thought those have to go together. That just
Yeah,
felt
it's
right
beautiful.
for me. So,
Yeah, we were talking about the experience of like holding an actual book, and like I even love the texture that you chose for the book.
Yeah.
It feels nice in your hands, and I like that it's got the little notebook paper on there. It's really sweet.
As a textual person, it's got this nice little light waxiness. Like there's a
Yes.
nice
Yeah.
texture to it, and it's a great size. I love paperback books. Love paper books. Thank you for giving me this.
yeah, absolutely.
What's it like being an author now? You said early on in this conversation things have changed a little bit. Here you are on a podcast,
Right.
doing podcast things. What's changed as an author?
Well, so my first official author event was at the Tucson Festival of Books that I
Okay.
went to in mid-March. And my publishing company went, and there were 12 of us from the roster, authors, that went. And it's a huge event. It's free. But I went by myself, to meet up with the publishing crew. And it was really like, okay, so who is Laura Lynn, the author? How does she talk to people? What does she say? How does she talk about her book? This was just someone I just didn't know, because I hadn't been in this position before. I'd only been in the position of writing a book. And so here I was in that setting, and I like her.
You're almost like building your own brand as a writer.
Yeah.
And I love
yeah.
that earlier you mentioned it took you a moment to claim the title writer.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's cool that
Yeah.
you stepped into it.
Yeah.
What do you like about her?
Yeah.
Or how is she different from previous Laura Lynns?
Well, the autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
and also the fact that people actually read my book, and then they want to talk about it, and that brings me so much joy. I've had people come in tears saying, that one part, XYZ, that was so me. And just to read it and know that someone else felt it, but also could articulate it was, important. So maybe some empathy comes in with that. But it's, I think always, or for so long, I carried a title or I wore a hat that really described more of what I do. I'm an assistant. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. None of these are obviously bad things, and now of course you say I'm an author, but like this is so intrinsically who I am and who I feel, and I feel comfortable here in my skin doing something for me that's not, on behalf of someone else, which is really hard role to get out of when you're a people pleaser.
We talked about this earlier, the transparency of sharing your story and how other people can relate to it, and it helps them also want to unmask and tell their story and become their true selves.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been one really exciting, unexpected part, or I guess I couldn't have anticipated it. I would just had to experience it, and so it's felt good.
Yeah, those roles can feel to me like leveraged, kind of work-based or production-based things. And yeah, none of them are wrong. I mean, you're a mother of 5?
5, yeah.
And you can maybe sweep up your identity in that instead of your simple being. This is Laura Lynn in this current version, instead of like, these are the things I do. I'm a lawyer. I'm an assistant. Like, well, okay, but is that you?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Now, I will say that as a little girl and growing up, my dream was to become a mother. So that dream, came true. Just thankfully, 5 times over. And
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the kind of ability to play this story another time with people. And have you helped your children navigate codependency in a healthier way, and sort of any other behavioral health kind of guidance? Kind of talk about your approach there.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously when you have 5 children, you've got a mix of personalities, and all beautiful, all different. And our youngest son, who is now 15, he is 10 years younger than our youngest adult child. So
yeah, you had 4 in 4.5 years.
I had
think
4
was
in
what
4.5 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
and then 1.
But there was twins in there, so that's how
Gotcha.
I got that in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you go, girl.
Yeah, it was a lot. Having twins did teach me to ask for help.
Okay.
Yeah, but just as far as
And sorry,
dynamics,
were the twins the second?
The twins were my second pregnancy.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
I had one at home who was 2.
You're like,
we were
okay.
actually living with my parents.
I kind of know what's going on.
2-year-old and twins.
Yes.
You gotta ask for help.
And then I've got twins, and then one of them is hungrier than the other, and they want it. Just it's a lot of you to give.
Yeah.
With one.
And you say it's obvious. Obviously, there's 5 different personalities here, and that's maybe not always obvious to parents that I talk to. They're like, man, they're so different. I'm like, yeah, they're different people. It's it's just kind of a fun conversation, but it is surprising a little bit how different they can be. They're each individual.
It is, and I thought the same thing when I said that they are all so different, because I do think it does come as a surprise when they come into their own of who they are, and maybe there are families where the children are really, their temperaments are just very much the same. But,
totally. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, simply the parent trying to come up with a system that works. It's like, oh, my system isn't working.
Yeah.
This is a very different person sometimes.
Yes, that is so true. And learning to parent my biological children was a completely different, the learning curve for parenting our youngest, who's adopted, night and day. And, different children, different ways, but then bring in the adoption part of it and just turn yourself upside down and do it how you never thought you would. It's just, there's a lot of strategies that you throw to the wind because they don't always work.
I have a random question. What is it like raising kids in a digital world? And I guess this is a question for you too.
Yeah.
Because something, I work for Mental Health America in our marketing and social media, and that's the one thing that I struggle with is like with mental health, social media is such a hot topic, if you will. And I always wonder about like what it, like I can work with, I don't have children, and working with children, like I just wonder what it's like as a parent trying to set rules and raise kids in this digital world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my kids, my oldest is 29, then my twins are 27, and then my youngest daughter is 25. And they were growing up, in the 90s, late 90s and the early 2000s. Okay. So TikTok didn't come on the scene until they were in high school, really, or maybe middle school.
Yeah, that's so true.
Playing games on the computer, that was a thing. Because I really wanted to be in control of my environment, I found every, support device that I could to put on the computers so that, you couldn't go to certain websites or, and, there were not a lot of options available.
Yeah.
And I would worry, and then somewhere along the way, I just had to let some of that go.
Yeah.
But my 15-year-old, he's not overly on his phone screen. He spends more time playing Minecraft. He likes Minecraft a lot. And so, I don't know. Minecraft, I have a tolerance for it because it's creative.
Yeah.
And I'm secretly an investor, not really, but back when Minecraft started, one of my sons asked if we could donate to Minecraft to help keep it going.
Oh, wow.
And we did. And who knew? I should have done something much bigger.
It was like crowdsourced funding to keep Minecraft going?
Something like that.
Interesting.
And a couple of times we made donations so that he could keep the game going. And
cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good that he's not glued to his phone because I feel like now, like I'm so glued to my phone and I wonder, I'm like, oh my gosh, it is like so addicting. And I wonder for you, I mean, your daughter too, it's like, you're kind of in the realm right before.
Yeah, she doesn't have a phone. She's going to turn 10 soon. I don't post her on social media. I think my strategy is, to fence. We don't have like a lot of digital tracking or anything, but just staying in a really close relationship with her and advising her on the things that we think are right for her age at this time. So that's part of the dependency issue is, you're 9. She's an adult in waiting is how I think about her all the time as you're a future adult, but you don't get to drive the car yet, Now, I do break the rules. I do put her on my lap and she does drive the car because you can be too strict, I think as well. So my role is to like explain what bad words mean and that there's no bad words. It's just, do you say it in front of the pastor or whatever, it's like, it's all contextual.
I don't know about that one, Steve.
But that's what it is. So you can be, I think you can be too loose. You could be too strict. So for me, it's just walking with her and putting kind of what I would say marbles in the jar of our relationship. So she knows that if and when she makes quote unquote a mistake or gets into some deep water, that I'm there for her. I'm not going to let her drown. But it is good to, know how to get out of that. And so it's, she doesn't have a phone, but she does have a tablet. And she can watch PBS and horse videos, on YouTube.
I love what you said about like her being able to admit making a mistake, because that breaks that cycle of perfectionism of like, instead of like praising a child repeatedly for always just doing everything right, praising them for acknowledging when maybe they did something wrong, or maybe like they could do something better. That breaks that perfectionism cycle.
It's such a deep cycle that I've grown up with, and you see it cycle, until you break the cycle. And the perfectionism thing is not ideal for a kiddo. They need to be able to say, oh, I lied. And, instead of what did you call it? Not repressing, but like shoving or pushing
it under the rug.
Pushing it under the rug.
Yeah.
That's what happens. And that's when messes really get made, So yeah.
And you do have to learn how to do that. I think even in my like adult life, learning how to admit
Can
your
you tell
mistakes.
me how?
It's very challenging, but teaching a kid that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, that's what I want her to see is, oh yeah, you don't have to be perfect. You can just admit to your mistakes. We all have them. And it's hard because we look up to parent figures or, power figures in our lives, and sometimes they're almost godlike to us, or these echoes of like what we think. They seem perfect
because you put on this perfect facade.
Yeah. And so part of my journey has been admitting my own stuff to her. Like, oh yeah, awesome. I did. Even the funny little things like, oh yeah, I had a cookie, like, way at night last night. It's like, there's no evil in that. It's just the hiding. It's not the crime. It's the cover up. Yep. It's like not the thing. It's us needing to hide from who we are, whatever.
Well, just write your memoir and then have your children read it, and then you have no more secrets.
There you go, Steve.
So I am actually.
I was waiting for it.
I just
Steve is
just
writing a memoir.
And it is very
Page
much
1.
a heavy unpacking.
Yeah.
There's some very funny moments in there. There's all sorts of funny moments, but there's also a lot of pain in it. And then I'm in not a disassociated way, but just in a conscious way, aware of how I've interpreted my childhood and how that kind of colors everything, puts everything in a certain hue. And so I'm actively going through like page 20 of this process that you've similar to what you went through, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it is. If you'll let it, it's eye-opening.
And you said you had to stop at certain points. And what did that work look like, as much as you want to share?
So when I got to, I was starting to write about exercise and weight, and where I learned that you exercise to eat, so to speak. So, which is not good advice at all.
Okay.
I'm not supporting that. But a friend, she wanted me to join the track team when I was in, I think, early high school, might have been 8th grade, but so that we could stay in shape. And that's just kind of where it began for me. And so as I was writing about the different things that I did to try to keep myself one size and one weight, whether it was not eating, laxatives, or I tried to throw up, but I couldn't do that. And so during that process, I was also dealing with menopause, where I was experiencing weight gain. So like these two things were coming in at me and kind of closing me in, if you will. And I just thought, there's an eating disorder somewhere in here. It's whether it has a name or not, it can be disordered eating. We all have disordered eating growing up in especially Western culture. But so I stopped and I got help with a nutritionist. I regularly see a psychiatrist, and I explained some of the behavior to her, and she said that's an eating disorder, those types of behavior. That's binging and purging. Yep. Exercising to keep it off, and et cetera. But so that was really, really challenging for me.
So when you were writing, these things were coming up actively. These weren't like memories from the past that were necessarily coming up. It was just work that you had to do along the way while you were writing this book.
Yes,
Oh,
because
interesting.
in order to continue to answer that question, who do you think you are? Obviously, as time changes, the answer changes. Well, I didn't know that I was experiencing an eating disorder when I was in middle school and high school. And because I wasn't sick, I wasn't thin, no one was putting me in the hospital, but to look back and then mourn almost the fact that this child felt like she needed to be a certain size to be accepted. Well, that type of thinking, it's a mental health issue. I mean, at least it was for me. But to look back on it, there's sadness that evolves around that. But then there's also explaining that comes along with it. Oh, so maybe this is why I behaved XYZ in this situation, because I've really had it ingrained in me that you take out X food group. I don't want to suggest any type of elimination.
Yeah, sure.
But so I really had to do some looking back and some, I guess just loving that child and saying, I'm sorry that you went through that you felt that's what you needed to do. But it's still a struggle today. But I have information. And so getting information was what I felt like would help me answer the question more fully, is get information. And then I just wrote about it.
Yeah, we're in Mental Health Month or Mental Health Awareness Month. And the more I think about that, the more I think that for me, mental health awareness is simply us going through this process of something that's so complicated. I mean, the brain is so complicated. And getting as much help and information as we can. And then maybe figuring out where the obstacles are that are not fixable or that we can't fix. But there's so much in there to unpack that we could fix if we have more information. And being able to talk about it. Good for you. Good for you. We talked about being able to talk about suicide or, binging and purging, and that we're afraid for different reasons to talk about it. And here you are, recorded conversation, talking about things that, maybe 10 or 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever, was hard for people to talk about, harder.
Well, I think it would also come as a surprise to people who don't know me very well, or actually who have known me well, because that was something that I didn't tell people ever about my not eating and over-exercising. Really up until I wrote the book, and I think is when I told Dawn. So it's a secret that is
thank you for
hard
sharing
to
that.
share. Yeah, well, you're welcome.
And I feel things present themselves different in different people, and so it is really nice to share, because there's someone who's going to read your book or watch this podcast and relate to that. And so it is so helpful to share your story.
Well,
Do you have another book?
do I have another book in me? I have one in me. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I want to write another book.
Okay.
And perhaps it'll come to me in an epiphany podcast.
Okay.
Like this one did.
Yeah, or maybe poetry. Who knows what? Maybe.
I would like to print, publish my poetry at some point.
Sweet.
But
Do you have any poetry you memorized, like a little paragraph or phrase of some of your poetry?
oh, I wish I could.
There's some in the back of your
I wish
book.
I could perform for you, Steve.
I don't know
but
if
I'm
it's.
sorry, I can't.
No, don't need to.
favorite
No need to
poetry
perform.
is
There's
actually.
definitely poetry in there.
Did you ever read Where the Sidewalk Ends?
Oh yeah.
Like
Shel
child poetry.
Silverstein.
Yes.
I think it's so sweet if you're wanted to write a poetry book.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be for children and something so
that's
sweet
a good
like
idea.
that.
Yeah.
Those are
Well,
that's my favorite.
I was listening to a podcast this morning with Adam Grant, and he was talking about the devastating circumstances around the giving tree, which is a whole other
yes.
podcast. But
Oh, I don't know.
I have seen this. I love that book.
You mean the actual story of the tree?
The story, I love it. And yes, there is I'm not well
it's
versed on it.
codependency.
Yes.
Is what it is. The tree is giving and giving and giving.
Till there's nothing left.
Till there's nothing left, and the child keeps coming back for more, and it never solves the problem. And the tree
Gets cut
loses
down.
everything, and the child is no better. And it's just such a different way to look at a book that you
know it is. There's
it's like, oh, he's being so or the tree's being so selfless.
Yes.
It sure is.
No.
I do remember that book, like, as a, like, I don't want to say child, an older child, like, reading that. And it's like, you do see how it's like, you almost feel like the kid is selfish in it. And I feel like me reading it, I was like, oh, don't be selfish and take from people until there's nothing left.
Yeah.
But I think that should be the message, but you can take it from the other side too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have to go back and read
principle,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because, it was a really sad book.
I did used to think, and this just could be my upbringing, I thought it was like a religious book as well. I thought it was supposed to have some religious
really?
connotation,
Okay.
but I could be wrong.
I don't know.
Well,
Everyone has to go read it now.
Everyone has to go read it. Yeah, because it turns into like a stump.
Yeah, he's like a stump.
That he can sit on
yeah, with nothing left to give.
with nothing
Yep.
left to give.
But a stump for the old man to sit on.
Sit on, yeah.
Yeah, was it a warning, a cautionary tale, or was there like an environmental
Two sides to
story in
every
there?
story.
Absolutely.
Well, you're a writer, you're an author, you are that, and then you're you, and
Yeah.
congratulations on the work you've done. I'm so grateful you're here and sharing what you've done and who you are in this iteration of Laura Lynn, and we'll see what's
Thank
next. But yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah,
one last question.
Yeah.
It could be a book, it could be like an album, it could be a podcast. You just mentioned one, so maybe that's the one you talk about. But what is a piece of content that you're either excited to consume or you are kind of in the middle of or just finished?
So, I'm reading kind of voraciously, so fast that I don't remember who's written what.
Yeah.
that I'm reading, but I'm
Logging it.
just on my Kindle. I've been doing that. But I guess I would mention this one podcast. It's called We Can Do Hard Things, and it's Glennon Doyle and her wife Abby Wambach and Glennon's sister Amanda. They call her sister, I think. But listening to that podcast when they were recording while I was writing this book actually provided insight into things that I was dealing with, including eating disorder and mental health, other mental health issues. I just really thought that was a good podcast. I don't listen to it as much anymore because I do think I overloaded myself with self-help.
Okay.
But it's a good one. It's a good podcast. Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Till next time.